Story 1. Room No 6. I should have trusted my instincts that night. The moment I stepped into the alley, a cold shiver ran down my spine. It wasn't just dark, it was the kind of darkness that swallowed sound, where even my footsteps felt too loud. The hostel was tucked away at the end of that narrow street, hidden like a secret nobody wanted to talk about. The building looked abandoned. The windows were either cracked or covered in thick grime, and the outer walls had streaks of black mold crawling upward like veins. The sign above the entrance barely hung on by a single chain, swaying in the wind as if warning me to turn back. But I didn't. I was tired, broke, and desperate for a place to rest. When you're traveling, sometimes you convince yourself that cheap just means good enough. I pushed open the heavy wooden door, and it groaned loudly, as if resisting my decision to go inside. The lobby was worse than the outside. The air smelled damp, a mix of old wood, mildew and something metallic, like rust or maybe blood. A single dim bulb flickered above the counter where the receptionist sat. He looked ancient, his back hunched, his skin pale and sagging. His eyes were glassy, like he hadn't slept in days. And when he finally looked up at me, I felt like he was staring through me, not at me. I cleared my throat, trying to sound casual. I need a room for the night." The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he slowly reached under the desk and slid a key across the counter. The metal was rusted, the number on the tag barely visible. Finally, in a voice that sounded more like a warning than hospitality, he muttered, "Top floor, room 6. I hesitated, waiting for him to ask for my ID or money or anything. But he just looked back down at the desk, ignoring me completely. My hand hovered over the key for a moment, before I picked it up. The cold metal burned against my palm, and for some reason, I almost wanted to put it back. The staircase groaned under my weight. As I climbed, each step echoed too loudly in the empty building. The walls were lined with faded wallpaper, peeling in long strips that revealed the cracked plaster beneath. The smell grew worse as I climbed higher. Stale air mixed with the faint, sour odor of rot. By the time I reached the top floor, my nerves were already stretched thin. The hallway was long and narrow, lit by a single weak bulb at the far end. The carpet was torn and threadbare, stained with dark blotches I didn't want to think about. There were 6 doors total, 3 on each side, but it was the last one at the end. The one with the number 6 carved faintly into the wood that pulled my attention. The key slid into the lock with a grinding noise. When I pushed the door open, a wave of dread washed over me. The room was wrong. There were no windows, not a single one, just 4 damp gray walls, bare and unfinished. The air inside was heavy, carrying a sour, moldy stench that made me gag. A single metal bed frame sat in the center of the room, with a thin, stained mattress sagging in the middle. A flickering bulb dangled from the ceiling, its light too weak to chase away the shadows. It didn't feel like a guest room. It felt like a box sealed, suffocating and dead. For a long moment I just stood in the doorway, my heart thudding in my chest. Every instinct screamed at me to turn around, walk back down those stairs and leave. But exhaustion pulled harder than fear. I convinced myself it was just another rundown hostel, nothing more. I placed my bag on the floor, closed the door, and turned off the light. The room fell into suffocating darkness, so thick it felt alive. I crawled onto the mattress, shut my eyes, and tried to sleep. But even then, lying in the dark, something inside me whispered that I had made a terrible mistake. I don't know what time it was when I woke up, but the darkness felt thicker than before, as if the air itself had grown heavier while I slept. My chest tightened, and I struggled to breathe. It wasn't like normal stuffy air, this felt intentional, like the room was pressing against my lung. At first I thought it was just a bad dream. I rolled over, pulling the thin blanket up to my chin, but then I heard it. A sound. Slow, deliberate, like fingernails dragging across concrete. My eyes snapped open, and I froze. The noise came from the wall to my left. A faint, scraping sound, low and steady, as if something was clawing its way closer. "Rats," I whispered to myself, though my voice cracked. Just rats. But even as I said it, I knew it couldn't be true. The walls were solid concrete, damp and cracked, but sealed tight. There were no holes, no gaps, no way for anything to crawl inside. The scratching grew louder, circling the room. It moved along the wall, then across the floor, then up near the ceiling, as though whatever was making the sound was pacing around me in the dark. My pulse pounded so loud it drowned out everything else. I sat up, straining my eyes in the pitch-black room. The single bulb overhead had burned out, leaving me blind. The shadows felt alive, closing in tighter with every second. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get worse, I heard it. A sigh. Deep, long, human. It came from right next to my ear. I jolted upright, my heart slamming against my ribs. My breath came in ragged gasps as I fumbled in the dark, searching for the doorknob. My fingers finally brushed the cold metal, and I twisted hard. It didn't move. I pulled again, harder this time. The knob rattled in my grip, but refused to turn. My chest heaved, panic boiling over as I yanked and slammed against the door, but it wouldn't open. That's when I noticed something carved into the wood. In the dim glow of my phone screen, I saw deep letters scratched into the door. Words I swear hadn't been there when I came in. "You can't leave once it begins." My stomach dropped. My phone slipped from my hands and clattered to the floor, the light flickering across the gray walls. And in that brief glow, I saw movement. A shadow. Not mine. Something tall and twisted shifted along the far wall. For a second I thought it was just my imagination, but then it stepped forward, slow, deliberate, like it had been waiting for me to see it. I screamed, throwing myself against the door, pounding with both fists until my knuckles burned. Behind me, footsteps echoed, slow, heavy, each step deliberate, growing louder as they moved closer. I didn't dare look back. My entire body shook as I yanked on the knob again, screaming for help. No one came. The footsteps stopped right behind me. I felt the air shift, colder now, pressing against my back, and then close enough to brush my ear. I heard it again. That same sigh, long, deep, hungry. Tears blurred my vision as I slammed my forehead against the door. "Please, let me out," I begged, my voice cracking. For a moment everything went silent. The footsteps stopped. The scratching ceased. Even the air felt still. And then slowly the knob turned in my hand. The door swung open with such force that I nearly fell into the hallway. I didn't stop to think. I bolted, my footsteps thunderous against the carpet, as I sprinted down the long narrow hall. The entire building seemed alive. The walls creaked, the floor groaned, and from somewhere behind me I swore I heard more footsteps chasing me. I didn't dare look back. My body moved on pure instinct, driven by a single thought: escape. When I finally stumbled into the lobby gasping for breath, the receptionist was still sitting at the desk, as still and lifeless as when I first saw him. His glassy eyes rose to meet mine, and for the first time that night, he spoke clearly. "You shouldn't have gone in there," he said softly, almost like he pitied me. My voice shook as I tried to form words. "That room, there's something in there." It tried to. The man cut me off, his face pale. "Room 6 was sealed years ago. No one should have given you that key." My blood ran cold. I looked down at the rusted key still clenched in my trembling hand. The metal felt far heavier now, as though it carried a weight far beyond its size. When I looked up again, the receptionist was staring at the key with something like fear in his eyes. He leaned closer, lowering his voice to a whisper. "That key was thrown away, after the last guest, never checked out." My throat went dry. I clutched the rusted key so tight it cut into my palm, leaving a thin line of blood. The receptionist's words echoed in my head. "The last guest, never checked out." "What are you saying?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You gave me this key. You sent me up there." The man shook his head slowly. His eyes glistened in the dim light, filled with something I couldn't name. Fear, or maybe regret. "No," he whispered. "I would never." His voice trailed off, and for the first time I noticed his hands. They were trembling against the desk, as if just being near the key terrified him. I wanted to throw it at him, demand answers, but before I could, the lights in the lobby flickered. Once, twice, then the room plunged into darkness. A sound crawled out of the silence. That same slow scratching. It was coming from the walls, circling us. "No," the receptionist muttered, his voice shaking. "Not again." I spun around, my breath catching in my throat. The scratching grew louder, and then came the sound I dreaded most. That long, deep sigh. Close, too close. Panic surged through me. I grabbed my phone, fumbling for the flashlight, but the screen wouldn't turn on. Dead. My stomach dropped. I hadn't used it enough to drain the battery. It was like the room itself had killed it. The receptionist stood suddenly, his chair scraping the floor. "Get out," he hissed. Now, I didn't wait for him to repeat it. I bolted toward the door, yanking at the handle. For a terrifying second, I thought it wouldn't open, but then it gave way and I stumbled into the freezing night air. The street was silent, empty, yet I didn't feel alone. My footsteps echoed too loudly as I ran, the shadows around me stretching unnaturally long, under the faint glow of the few working street lamps. I didn't dare look back. I just ran. But the thing about running from something you can't see, you never really know if it's still behind you. I didn't stop until I reached the next block, my chest burning, my legs trembling. I leaned against a lamppost, gasping for air, clutching the key so tight, my knuckles turned white. That's when I heard it again. The sigh. This time it came from inside my pocket. Hands shaking, I pulled the key out. The tag with the number had cracked in half, the metal darker than before, as if it had aged decades in just minutes. My stomach churned as I stared at it, and before I could react, a shadow passed over the pavement beneath me. I looked, there was no one there, and yet, the shadow remained, stretching toward me like a hand reaching out. I screamed and dropped the key. It clattered against the ground, echoing far too loud for such a small sound. The moment it left my hand, the shadow vanished. The air grew lighter, easier to breathe. For the first time all night, I felt like whatever had followed me was gone. But some things you can't forget. The next morning, after no sleep, I forced myself to return. The alley was still there, but the hostel was. Where the building had stood, there was nothing but an empty lot, overgrown with weeds and scattered bricks. No walls, no front door, no receptionist. It was as if the hostel had never existed. And yet, lying in the dirt, near the center of the lot, was the rusted key. I didn't pick it up. Couldn't, because in that moment, I finally understood the truth. Nobody gives you the key to room 6. It finds you, and once you've been inside, it never really lets you leave. Even now, years later, I sometimes wake up in the middle of the night, struggling to breathe. My walls feel too close, my room too quiet, and just when I think it's only in my head, I hear it. That slow, deep sigh, right beside my ear.
Story 2. The Bunkmate. When I moved into the hostel for my first semester of college, I expected noise, late-night parties, and maybe the occasional roommate drama. What I didn't expect was the suffocating silence that filled the place after dark. The building was old, so old that the paint peeled in long strips from the walls, and the wooden floors groaned like they carried a secret. My assigned room was on the 3rd floor, tucked in a corner hallway where the ceiling lights flickered every few seconds. The moment I stepped inside, I felt the weight of something I couldn't explain. Room 317. There were 2 beds, one by the window, the other by the door. I chose the one near the window, tossing my suitcase on it with a sigh. The air smelled faintly of mold and something metallic, like rust or blood. My roommate hadn't arrived yet. His side of the room was strangely neat though. Bed already made, blanket tucked tight. A single duffel bag sat at the foot, zipped closed. I remember thinking, he must have checked in earlier. That first night, I unpacked, called my parents and tried to settle in. Around midnight, I heard the door creak open. Footsteps shuffled across the floor, slow, careful. Then the springs on the other bed groaned. Someone had just lain down, relieved that my roommate had finally shown up. I muttered, "Hey man, I'm Alex. Nice to meet you." No answer. I frowned in the dark. Maybe he was tired from traveling. "No worries," I whispered. "We'll talk tomorrow." I rolled over and eventually drifted to sleep, but sometime in the night, I woke up. Not from a sound, at least, not at first. It was the silence that pulled me awake. Too deep, too heavy, like the room itself was holding its breath. Then came the sound, a slow inhale, and an even slower exhale. It wasn't snoring. It wasn't sleep. It was deliberate, steady, like whoever lay across from me was wide awake. Listening, I pulled the blanket up to my chin, telling myself not to be paranoid. Lots of people breathe weird when they sleep. But when I closed my eyes, I swear I felt his gaze on me, cold, unblinking. By morning I tried to laugh it off. My roommate's bed was neatly made, the blanket smooth as if no one had ever touched it. His duffel bag still sat at the foot, in the exact same spot. Had I dreamed it? That day passed in a blur of orientation events and meeting classmates. I didn't return to my room until late, exhausted, and half dreading another awkward night with a silent bunkmate. The hallway to 317 was darker than usual, only one light buzzing faintly at the far end. I unlocked the door, pushed it open and froze. The bed by the door, my roommate's bed, was unmade, the blanket thrown aside, pillow dented deep, and on the floor beside it was a wet footprint. Just one, right next to the bed. My heart thudded in my chest as I glanced around. The duffel bag was gone, completely gone. That night, I told myself it didn't matter. People come and go all the time in hostels. Maybe he'd moved to another room. Maybe I was imagining things in my half-asleep state. But as I lay in bed, staring into the dark, I realized something that made my blood run cold. If he'd left, who was breathing in the room with me last night? The next morning, I couldn't shake the unease. I searched the hostel lobby, hoping to spot my supposed roommate. The receptionist, a tired-looking woman with half-moon glasses, flipped through a stack of papers when I asked, "Room 317? "No, sir. That's a single occupancy room," she said without looking up. I blinked. "Wait, what? But there are 2 beds in there." She frowned, adjusting her glasses. "Old building. Some rooms used to be doubles, but after incidents we changed them. You're the only one assigned to 317. "Incidents?" I asked, my voice tighter than I intended, but she just shook her head. "If you want to move, I can check for availability tomorrow. Tonight we're full." I walked back upstairs, my legs trembling. She had to be mistaken. I saw the bag. I heard the breathing. When I entered my room again, the bed was perfectly made, like no one had ever touched it. Both beds, side by side, neat. I didn't unpack much that night. I sat at my desk, headphones in, pretending to study, though every creak in the hallway made me flinch. Around midnight I finally crawled into bed, leaving the lamp on this time. That's when I heard it. The scrape. Soft, dragging, like nails on fabric. I sat up, staring across the room. The other bed was empty, perfectly made, but the blanket shifted, just slightly, as if someone was lying beneath it. My throat dried. "Hello?" No answer. I forced myself off the bed, inching closer. My own reflection stared back at me from the window glass, pale and shaking. When I reached the bunk, I grabbed the blanket edge in one swift motion. Nothing, just sheets, tucked so tight they were almost stiff. I exhaled shakily, half laughing at myself. God, I'm losing it. I turned to climb back into my own bed, when the lamp flickered, once, twice, then went out. Darkness swallowed the room, and in the silence that followed, came a voice right behind me. A whisper so low I almost thought I imagined it. "Move over." I spun around, my back pressed to the wall, my chest heaving. Nothing. The empty bunk lay untouched. I didn't sleep that night. I sat with the lamp on after it flickered back, staring at the door, every shadow moving in my peripheral vision. By morning, I packed my bag. I didn't care what the receptionist said. I was moving out. But when I reached the lobby, she frowned again. You haven't even spent a week there." "I can't." My voice cracked. "There's something in that room." Her expression tightened, and she leaned forward, lowering her voice. "Students say, sometimes the old rooms don't forget, especially the double. They still wait for someone to come back." I felt ice crawl down my spine. Wait for who? But before she could answer, another student interrupted at the desk, and she waved me off. "Come back later. I'll check availability." I stormed back upstairs, furious. All I wanted was my stuff so I could sleep literally anywhere else. Library, cafeteria, I didn't care. But when I opened the door to 317, I froze. My suitcase, my clothes, my books, everything was gone. All that remained was a single duffel bag, sitting at the foot of the other bed, the exact same one I'd seen the first night. I froze in the doorway, staring at the duffel bag, sitting neatly on the bunk, across from mine. My bag, my actual belongings, were gone. It didn't make sense. Who would come in here, steal everything, and replace it with the exact same bag I'd seen that first night? The air in the room felt heavier than usual, almost damp, as though the walls themselves were sweating. My first instinct was to run, but some twisted curiosity pushed me forward. I needed to know what was inside that bag. Hands trembling, I crouched down and unzipped it. Clothes, old, folded neatly, not mine. They smelled faintly of mildew, like they'd been sitting in storage for years. At the bottom I found something harder, an old, leather-bound journal. Its cover was cracked, the pages yellowed. I flipped through, skimming messy handwriting. Each entry began the same way. Another night in 317. My breath caught. Whoever wrote this had stayed in my room. One entry stopped me cold. He talks to me now, says he hates the silence, says he needs me to stay. When I try to sleep, he lies down beside me. I feel the mattress dip, but no one is there. If I complain, he gets angry. He doesn't like when people want to leave. My hands shook so violently the book nearly slipped from my grasp. I snapped it shut and shoved it back into the bag, stumbling backward toward the door. That's when I noticed something new. My bed, the sheets had been pulled back, the indentation of a body pressed deep into the mattress, as though someone invisible had been lying there waiting for me. The door handle wouldn't budge, no matter how hard I twisted, shoved, or slammed my shoulder into it. The door held firm. Panic clawed up my throat. I pounded on the wood, screaming for help, but the walls seemed to swallow my voice. Then came the breathing, slow, heavy, right behind me. I spun around, back pressed against the locked door. The air in the room shifted, and though I couldn't see anything, I felt it, the weight of someone standing there, watching. The blanket on the other bed began to slide back, inch by inch, as though invisible fingers were pulling it down. The mattress dipped, springs groaned, and then, a whisper, "Lie down, it's my turn to rest." Tears blurred my vision as I shook my head. No, no, no. The lights flickered violently before cutting out completely, leaving me in absolute blackness. In the silence, the mattress beside mine creaked, as though something huge had just climbed into bed. The sound of steady breathing filled the room. 2 sets now, mine, ragged and fast, and his deep calm, endless. I pressed myself against the door, praying for it to open. Suddenly, the journal I'd thrown back into the bag slid across the floor and stopped at my feet. Pages fluttered open on their own, as if unseen hands were turning them. My eyes caught the last written words. "He doesn't let anyone leave. The only way out is to take my place." A cold hand brushed my wrist. I screamed, slamming the door with both fists, until without warning, it flung open. I stumbled into the hallway, gasping for air, collapsing against the wall. Other students poked their heads out of nearby rooms, annoyed, asking what was wrong. I tried to explain, but when they glanced inside room 317, they only saw emptiness. No second bed, no bag, no journal, just one neatly made bed, mine. By morning, I checked out of the hostel without a word. The receptionist didn't look surprised. In fact, she didn't even ask why. She just gave me a thin smile, slid my ID back across the desk, and said softly, "Don't worry, he always finds another bunkmate." Story 3: The Locked Stall. When I first moved into the hostel, the bathrooms were what creeped me out the most. Long, tiled corridors with fluorescent lights that buzzed overhead like angry insects. The air always smelled faintly of bleach mixed with something damp and sour, that no amount of cleaning could erase. But the strangest thing about the bathrooms wasn't the smell, it was the last. There were 4 stalls in a row, and the final one, the one farthest from the entrance, was always locked. No matter the time of day, no matter how many people came and went, that door never opened. At first, I thought it was out of order, but the weird part was, I never saw maintenance workers fixing it, never saw a sign posted, just that locked door, with its chipped paint and a rusted latch, sitting there like a secret no one wanted to talk about. One night, about a week after moving in, I was brushing my teeth when another student walked in. He was tall, thin, looked exhausted, and for some reason he kept glancing at that locked stall.
After a moment, he leaned toward me and whispered, "Don't ever try to open." I laughed nervously, thinking he was joking, but his expression stayed serious. "I mean it. Whatever's in there, it doesn't like being disturbed." Before I could ask what he meant, he left, toothbrush still in hand, like he suddenly remembered somewhere else he needed to be. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. My room was on the same floor as the bathroom, and when the hostel quieted down after midnight, I swore I could hear faint noises echoing from inside that last stall. Not flushing, not pipes, something softer, like breathe. I told myself I was imagining things. Hostels were full of creaks, whispers through vents, and echoes that turned ordinary sounds into nightmares. Still, I avoided that stall for the next week, until curiosity got the better of me. It was a Thursday night when it happened. I woke up around 2:30 a.m., my throat painfully dry. I grabbed my water bottle, but it was empty. The only way to refill it was to sneak down the hall to the bathroom sink. The building was silent as I padded barefoot down the corridor, every step echoing too loud. When I pushed open the bathroom door, the flickering fluorescent lights greeted me like usual, buzzing faintly. The other stalls were open, doors ajar, but the last one locked. As always, I tried not to look, filling my bottle quickly, telling myself to leave, but as I turned to go, I froze. The sound was faint, but unmistakable. A low sob, a woman's sob, muffled, coming from inside the locked stall. Chills exploded across my arms. I whispered, "Hello," before I could stop myself. The crying cut off instantly. Silence pressed against my ears, so hard I thought I'd gone deaf. Then slowly, the metal latch rattled, just once, as though something on the other side had touched it. My body screamed at me to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I found myself leaning closer, palms sweaty, until I was only inches from that door, and then, I heard it. A wisp, so close, it could have been right against my ear. "Let me out." I bolted, water bottle clattering to the floor as I sprinted down the hall. Back to my room, I locked my door and buried myself under the covers, heart hammering so hard I thought it would stop. For hours I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard that voice again, not pleading this time, demanding, "Let me out." The next morning, I tried convincing myself it was just a dream. Maybe I'd been half asleep. Maybe the sound was water in the pipes. Maybe my brain had filled in the rest. But when I picked up my water bottle from the bathroom floor later that day, something made my stomach twist. The cap was missing. I knew I hadn't lost it. I always screwed it back tight, but now the bottle was wide open, lying exactly where I'd dropped it. Cap gone. I searched everywhere, under sinks, on the counter, even in the trash bins. Nothing. That evening, I decided to ask around. During dinner, I sat across from a group of second-year students who had been living in the hostel longer. They were joking loudly, but as soon as I brought up the locked stall, their laughter died like someone cut the power. "You heard something, didn't you?" one of them asked quietly. I hesitated, then nodded. The tallest guy leaned in. "They say a girl died in there, years ago. She locked herself inside, never came out alive." Another added, "Some people say she was murdered. Nobody knows for sure. All they know is the door's been locked ever since. Even when maintenance tried breaking it open, it wouldn't budge, like it wants to stay The whole table went silent. One of the guys muttered, "Just don't talk about it too much. She hears when you talk about her." I laughed nervously, but my food tasted like dust. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't stop replaying his words. At around 1 a.m., the sound started again. I was half asleep when I heard water running, not from my sink, not from the hallway pipes. This was closer, the steady rush of a shower turning on, echoing through the vents, but no one ever showered at that hour. Curiosity gnawed at me. Against all common sense, I got up and walked toward the bathroom. The corridor stretched endlessly, my footsteps muffled against the carpet. The fluorescent lights inside buzzed louder than usual, like they were straining against the darkness. The sound of water echoed from the locked stall. Steam curled beneath the door, thick and warm, but the stalls didn't even have showers, only toilets and sinks. I knew that, every student knew that, yet there it was, the hiss of water, the smell of damp air, like someone had been inside for hours. My throat tightened as I leaned closer. "Hello?" This time I didn't hear crying, no whisper, Just silence, and then bang. Something slammed against the door so hard the entire frame rattled. I stumbled back, heart crashing against my ribs. My breath ragged. The steam vanished instantly, like someone had pulled it away with invisible hands. The bathroom was freezing cold, so cold my teeth ached. I ran again, but this time, when I reached my room, I swore I saw something out of the corner of my eye, a shadow standing at the far end of the hall, still watching. I slammed my door shut and shoved my desk against it. For the rest of the night, I sat awake staring at that door, praying it wouldn't move, but it did. Just before dawn, as the first light of morning bled through the curtains, my doorknob rattled slowly, gently, like someone testing it. And then 3 soft knocks. I didn't answer. I didn't even breathe. Eventually, the sound stopped, but when I finally worked up the courage to move the desk and check the hallway, it was empty, except for one thing, my missing water bottle cap, placed neatly outside my door. I couldn't sleep that night. Every creak of the floorboards, every hum of the fluorescent lights, made my skin crawl. Around midnight, curiosity and fear battled for control, and fear won, just enough for me to tiptoe toward the bathroom. The hallway was empty, silent, too silent. The locked stall loomed at the far end like a black hole, its chipped door frame outlined in the flickering light. My stomach churned, my pulse thundering in my ears. Every instinct screamed at me to stop, every instinct screamed at me to run, but I needed to know. When I reached the door, I froze. Steam was curling from beneath the crack again, and I could hear its soft, shallow breathing, rhythmic, deliberate. I whispered, almost too softly to hear myself, "Who's there?" No reply. Then the latch rattled slowly, deliberate. I stumbled backward, panic rising, but something compelled me to reach for it. My fingers grazed the metal. The door was warm, hot, like it had been pressed against a fire. The breathing stopped. Silence pressed against my ears so tightly, I thought it would suffocate me. Then came a voice, clear, human, but impossibly close. Finally, someone to talk to. I spun around. The bathroom was empty. The tiles were wet, the sink dripping, but no one was there. Only the last stall, still locked. Who are you?" The voice laughed, soft and hollow, echoing around the small room. "I've been here, waiting for someone to notice me, someone to hear me. Now, you can't leave." A chill ripped through me. The tiles beneath my feet seemed to pulse. The air grew thick, heavy, like it was alive. I backed toward the door, fumbling to open it, but the handle wouldn't turn. No matter how hard I twisted, how much I shoved, it was stuck. I felt it then, cold fingers brushing against my ankle. I yelped, jerking. The air around the stall shimmered, like heat waves rising off asphalt, and the sound of soft sobbing filled the room. The stall door creaked slowly, inch by inch, as though pushed from the inside. A shadow darker than darkness itself spilled out into the small room. I couldn't see it fully, but I felt it, a presence, looming, patient, terrifying. You can't leave," the voice whispered again, now directly in my ear. I spun, and for a second, I saw a pale, ghostly face pressed against the door frame, its eyes hollow, mouth moving soundlessly. I stumbled backward, fell against the sinks, my breath ragged. The shadow moved closer, sliding silently across the floor. My heart raced, as my legs gave way and I collapsed to the ground. Then suddenly, the shadow vanished. The lights flickered back on. Silence returned, almost immediately, but the smell lingered, damp, metallic, like something had been crying blood. I scrambled to my feet and ran. I didn't stop. Not when I reached my room, not when I grabbed my bag, not when I slammed the hostel's front door behind me and ran out into the night. I never returned. Months later, I heard from another student that room 204, another old, forgotten stall, was locked permanently after strange noises were reported. That they'd heard a voice whispering, crying, begging, sometimes commanding. I didn't want to believe, but sometimes late at night, when I brush my teeth or wash my hands, I hear it. The soft sigh, the faint scraping of metal, the whisper, "Don't leave, stay with me." I never go into public bathrooms alone anymore. I never use a stall alone, and I never forget the sound of that locked stall, waiting, because I know it's still there, waiting, and the next time it chooses someone, maybe it won't let them go either.